Welcome to Monk's Temple. Let's begin right where you are. Feel the weight of your body against the chair, the floor, the bed. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Hear the sounds around you. Don't change anything. Don't solve anything. Just be present to this single moment. That simple act of noticing is the foundation of everything we'll explore. In the modern world, we've turned peace into a product. We imagine enlightened beings floating above their problems, radiating light, untouched by ordinary life. We think if we just meditate enough, we might graduate to permanent bliss. The Buddha described awakening differently. The word he used, nibbana, means blowing out or extinguishing. Not becoming a being of light. The fire's finally going out. What fires? 3 that have burned you since birth. The fire of craving, that endless hunger whispering, you'll be complete when you get that promotion, that relationship, that validation. The fire of aversion, that clenched fist resistance saying, this shouldn't be happening. The fire of delusion, the thick smoke making you believe your thoughts are facts. Buddhism calls these lobha, dosa, and moha. You feel them daily. That surge of wanting when you see something you don't need. That flash of irritation when someone cuts you off. That endless loop replaying a conversation you wish went differently. That's the fire burning. Here's the paradox no one prepares you for. When these fires start cooling, it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like something's wrong. I remember a friend, a high-powered executive who built her identity around achievement. She came to me distressed. I got the promotion I worked 5 years for. I walked back to my office, closed the door, and felt nothing. What's wrong with me? Nothing was wrong. Something was right. The fire of craving that drove her life was starting to cool. But our culture has no framework for this, so she interpreted healing as breaking. We'll explore 7 unexpected signs the fires are cooling in your life. Signs most people miss because they look like problems. Signs that feel like losing something but are actually freedom beginning. Before going further, I'll be honest. I'm not an enlightened master. I still get irritated when my Wi-Fi drops. I still reach for my phone seeking validation. I still want things I don't need. But Buddhist psychology taught me to see these as they happen. Not from outside as some ideal, but from inside as a messy human paying attention. The path isn't about becoming holy. It's about what stops hijacking your day. The spaces opening between trigger and reaction. Moments you realize old patterns don't control you like they used to. These moments don't feel like breakthroughs. They feel like a Tuesday afternoon noticing light hit your coffee cup and grinning for no reason. They feel like a family dinner where your uncle says something provocative and instead of arguing, you pass the potatoes and feel relief. These signs are probably happening now, whether you've recognized them or not. If this resonates, subscribe to Monk's Temple. We take ancient wisdom and make it practical for modern life. Not a belief system to adopt, but a toolkit to use. Hit subscribe and join people learning to watch the fire instead of being burned by it. The 3 unwholesome roots keep suffering burning. Lobha is craving. Not just dramatic greed. The midnight scroll through online stores seeking completion. The phone checks for likes, hungry for validation. This fire burns because it's never satisfied. Like drinking salt water to quench thirst. Temporary relief, thirst worse. Dosa is aversion. Energy of pushing away. Irritation when plans change. Anger when someone disagrees. Resentment carried long after conflict ends. This fire burns by warring with reality. This shouldn't happen, but it is. Fighting what already is. Exhausting. Moha is delusion. The smoke blocking clear seeing. Mistaking thoughts for facts. The story about who you are, feeling solid but changing moment by moment. Confusion keeping you identified with waves rather than recognizing yourself as ocean. These three intertwine. Craving leads to aversion when you can't get what you want. Aversion leads to delusion as you build stories justifying anger. Delusion leads to craving as you seek things to fill the void. A self-perpetuating cycle most never notice because they're living inside it. The signs we're exploring show this cycle slowing. Roots losing grip. Feedback loop developing gaps. In those gaps, something new becomes possible. A woman in her 60s came to a teacher I once met. 40 years practicing, every retreat, every book. She sat down frustrated. I still get angry. I still want things. I still get confused. What's wrong with me? The teacher asked quietly, when you get angry now, how long does it last? She thought. Maybe minutes. Sometimes less. And 40 years ago, before you started practicing? She paused. Days, she whispered. Sometimes weeks. You've spent 40 years looking for progress and completely missed that the fire isn't burning as long. That's not failure. That's the whole path. We're not looking for dramatic transformation. We're noticing subtle shifts. How long anger lasts. Whether craving has the same power. Watching smoke clear moment by moment. The first sign the fire's cool, the world feels less magnetic. Things that used to pull you lose their charge. Remember childhood toy store? Overwhelming pull of bright boxes. You needed that toy. Future happiness depended on it. A week later, forgotten at the bottom of the toy box. Adults just upgrade toys. New car, promotion, bigger house, likes on photos. Our culture is a 24-hour toy store designed for perpetual wanting. Advertisements whisper, you're incomplete, this completes you. Social media manufactures envy. The economy literally depends on you not being satisfied. So when the magnetic pull fades, it's unsettling. Promotion brings nothing. Friend's dream car sparks no envy. Scrolling feels exhausting, not craving. This is viraga, craving fading. Not losing enjoyment. You still enjoy things. The energy shifts from desperate clutching to lighter engagement. You stop asking things to complete you. You engage fully, then let go. The second sign that the fires are cooling arrives in the most unexpected place, your family dinner table. You're sitting there, maybe for a holiday or a regular Sunday gathering, and someone says something you know is absolutely wrong. Not just slightly off, but fundamentally, provably incorrect. Your uncle, your cousin, whoever it is, launches into a topic that would have once triggered a full-scale response. The old you would have felt the heat rise. Your jaw would tighten. You'd be waiting for your turn, mentally collecting ammunition, preparing your devastating rebuttal. You'd need to correct them, to prove you're right, to win. The conversation would become a battlefield, and your identity would be on the line. Being right felt like survival. But something different happens now. You hear the words. You notice the old familiar heat start to rise. And then you notice something else. A gap. A tiny pause between the stimulus and your response. In that gap, you watch the heat. You watch the mind begin spinning its story about justice and truth and how someone needs to set things straight. And then, instead of leaping into the arena, you just pass the potatoes. You might even say, "Huh, that's interesting," and genuinely mean it. Not because you agree. Because you can see it as their map of the world, not yours. The desperate need to correct them, to be acknowledged as right, simply isn't there. The fire of aversion, of dosa, is cooling. This doesn't mean you become a doormat who never speaks up. You can still voice your truth when something truly matters, when there's real harm to address. The difference is in the energy behind it. The old energy was a clenched fist, desperate for victory. The new energy is more like calmly pointing to a sign. You're not invested in whether they read it. You're not wounded if they walk past it. You're just offering information. I experienced this recently with an old friend from college. We were catching up after years apart, and he started sharing his views on something I felt strongly about. His perspective was completely opposite to mine, and he was certain he was right. The old me would have spent the next hour explaining, correcting, proving, pulling up facts to demonstrate my superiority. But as I listened, I noticed something strange. The need to convince him just wasn't there. I heard myself say, "I see it differently, but I'm not here to debate tonight. Tell me more about your work." And the conversation shifted to something real, something connecting us rather than dividing us. The relief I felt afterward was surprising. I realized how much energy I'd spent over the years defending positions that ultimately didn't matter. The arguments I'd won hadn't brought me closer to anyone. They just reinforced the walls around my identity. There's a teaching in Buddhism about right speech, samavaka. It's not just about being nice. It's about speaking what's true, helpful, and timely. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can say is nothing at all. Because the person arguing with you isn't really arguing with you. They're arguing with their image of you, their projection, the story they've built in their mind about what you represent. It's like fighting with a mannequin dressed in your clothes. The mannequin isn't listening. A teacher I once heard about was known for his complete peace during conflict. A visitor came to his temple specifically to provoke him, shouting insults, calling him every name imaginable. The teacher just sat calmly, offering tea. Finally the visitor screamed, "Why aren't you responding? I'm attacking you." The teacher said gently, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse to accept it, who keeps the gift?" The visitor sputtered, "The one who tried to give it." "Then I suggest you keep your gifts. I have no use for them." Your whole life, you've been accepting every gift of argument offered to you. Someone offers a fight, and you grab it with both hands. When aversion cools, you simply stop reaching out. You let the gift fall. You might even feel compassion for the person so desperate to give it away. This sign shows up in smaller ways too. Online debates that used to fire you up now look like people screaming into voids. Comment sections that once pulled you in now feel exhausting. You scroll past, uninterested. Not because you're above it, but because you can see what's happening. People aren't discussing ideas. They're defending identities. How do you know this is genuine cooling, not just suppression? There's a simple test. Before responding to something that triggers you, feel your chest. If it's tight, if there's constriction, if you feel heat but are holding it in, that's suppression. That's smiling while internally screaming, the fire's still raging inside. If you feel genuinely neutral, if the fire just isn't igniting, that's cooling. Another test: can you disagree peacefully and maintain boundaries when needed, without the desperate hunger to be acknowledged as right? If yes, the fire is cooling. If you're avoiding conflict because confrontation feels dangerous, that's fear, not freedom. I think about a colleague I used to work with who seemed impossible to deal with. Everything was an argument. Every email had an edge. I spent years tensing up before interacting with him, preparing my defenses. Then one day, something shifted. He sent his usual provocative message, and I read it and felt nothing. No tightness. No defensive story building. Just words on a screen. I responded briefly and moved on. Later I realized the change wasn't in him. It was in me. I'd stopped accepting his gifts of conflict. There's a line from the Dhammapada that captures this perfectly: hatred is never ended by hatred. Only by non-hatred does it end. You can't win an argument into peace. You can't fight your way to connection. When you stop needing to be right, you don't lose anything except the burden of constantly defending yourself. This is the second sign. The arguments lose their fuel because there's less solid self to defend. And what's left is something much more valuable: the space to actually hear another person, and maybe, for the first time, to actually be heard yourself. The third sign that the fires are cooling is one of the most counterintuitive. It shows up when someone asks you a question you don't know the answer to, and instead of feeling that familiar panic, that urgent need to fake it, you simply say, "I don't know," and feel completely fine. We are raised in a culture that worships certainty. From our earliest school days, we're rewarded for having the right answer and penalized for not knowing. We learn quickly that, "I don't know," is a weakness, an admission of failure, something to avoid at all costs. By adulthood, most of us have become experts at pretending. We nod along in conversations about topics we barely understand. We offer confident opinions based on articles we skimmed. We fill silences with our own voices to seem knowledgeable. So when the fire of delusion, of moha, starts to cool, the first thing you notice is that the pressure to know everything just dissolves. You're at a party. The conversation turns to something complex, maybe geopolitics or economics or the latest technology. Someone asks your opinion. The old you would have scrambled, assembled something from fragments of information, offered a confident-sounding but ultimately hollow take. But the new you pauses, feels the absence of that familiar panic, and says, "You know, I actually don't know enough about that to have a strong opinion." And you mean it. And it feels amazing. It feels like freedom. I remember this happening to me a few years ago with my own father. He's someone who values certainty, who reads constantly and has strong views on everything. We were discussing a political situation, and he asked me a specific question about something I hadn't studied. The old me would have pretended, would have offered some vague analysis to maintain his respect. Instead I heard myself say, "Dad, I honestly don't know. I haven't looked into that enough." He nodded, and we moved on. The conversation didn't collapse. the respect didn't disappear. Nothing bad happened. In fact, something good happened. I felt more honest, more present, more real. This is the beginning of what Buddhism calls moha weakening, the delusion of certainty losing its grip. The mind stops pretending it knows what it doesn't. It becomes comfortable in the space of not knowing. And in that space, something new becomes possible, genuine curiosity. Think about people who are absolutely certain about everything. Conspiracy theorists, for example, have explanations for every event, every mystery fits neatly into their preordained narrative. That certainty feels powerful. It provides order in a chaotic world. But it's a prison. Their mind is a small, locked room with no windows. When you can say, "I don't know," your mind becomes a vast open sky where anything might appear. There's a teaching in Zen called beginner's mind. The master Shunryu Suzuki said, "In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind there are few." The expert has already categorized the world, filed it away, stopped looking. The beginner sees everything fresh, as if for the first time. The beginner can be surprised. The beginner can learn. The Buddha himself encouraged this kind of radical openness. In the famous Kalama Sutta, he told a group of skeptical villagers not to believe something just because he said it, or because it's in scripture, or because their teacher told them. He said, "Test it for yourself. Observe. Verify. See what actually leads to your own well-being and peace." He was encouraging a sacred skepticism, a willingness to not know until you've seen for yourself. There's a Zen koan that says, "Not knowing is most intimate." Think about that. When you think you know someone, you stop really seeing them. You've got them figured out. You project your past experiences onto the present moment. But when you approach someone with not knowing, you're actually available to them. You see them as they are right now, not as your memory of them. The same is true for everything. When you think you know what a sunset is, you stop really looking at it. When you approach it with beginner's mind, it becomes a miracle again. I met someone once who embodied this beautifully. She was a scientist, someone who had spent her life studying the natural world. I expected her to be full of certainties, of conclusions. Instead, she was full of questions. Every answer she gave opened into more wonder, more curiosity. She said to me once, "The more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know." And that's not discouraging. That's the most exciting part. How do you know this is genuine wisdom, not intellectual laziness? There's a distinction. Genuine not knowing comes from having honestly examined something and recognized the limits of your knowledge. You've done the work, and you know where your understanding ends. Intellectual laziness is not having bothered to look, using "I don't know" as an excuse to avoid thinking. The Buddha encouraged investigation, Dhammavichaya, as one of the factors of awakening. This sign isn't about not thinking. It's about holding your conclusions lightly, remaining open to new information. There's another distinction too. Performative uncertainty, using "I don't know" as opposed to seem humble while secretly hoping people will praise your wisdom, is just ego in disguise. True not knowing has no charge to it. It's not performing. It's simply accurate. You don't know, and that's fine. Practice this once today. In a conversation, when a question arises that you genuinely don't know the answer to, say, "I don't know." Don't apologize. Don't qualify it with, but I think. Don't explain why you don't know. Just let the 3 words stand on their own. Notice how it feels. If it makes you uncomfortable, good. That's just the mind clinging to its old need for certainty. The fire of delusion weakens a little more every time you let it go. This is the 3rd sign. The need to have an answer for everything fades. Certainty loosens its grip. And what's left is the wide open space of genuine curiosity, where life becomes fresh and new again, moment by moment. The 4th sign that the fires are cooling is perhaps the most subtle and challenging of all, because it attacks the very core of who we think we are. It shows up as a strange sense that you're not as special as you used to be. And that feels, at first, like a loss. From the moment we're born, we're told we're special. Our parents tell us. Our teachers tell us. Our entire culture reinforces it. Every movie is about a special person who rises up to meet a challenge. Social media is a giant machine for convincing everyone that they are a unique and compelling brand. We curate our lives to look special. We post the highlight reel, the perfectly filtered photo, the witty caption that proves we have a unique perspective. We tell stories about our journey, our purpose, our transformation. Being special feels like the goal. It's what justifies our existence. So when that need starts to fade, it can feel like you're disappearing. You're at a party, and someone starts talking about their spiritual journey, their incredible transformation, their unique path to becoming who they are today. The old you might have listened with admiration or envy, thinking, my story isn't special enough. The new you listens, and a quiet thought arises, this is exhausting. Not in a mean way. Just in a genuine, I'm tired just listening to this, way. The performance of specialness suddenly seems like so much work. Or something good happens to you. You get a compliment, you have a small victory. The old reflex is to share it immediately, to post it, to get witnesses, to have it validated by others so it becomes real. The new reflex is just to be with it. To let the good feeling be there inside you without needing to broadcast it. It's complete in itself. This is the beginning of what Buddhism calls mana weakening. Mana is often translated as conceit, but it's not just about arrogance. It's the deep-seated conceit of, I am. It's the constant subtle feeling that there is a separate, me, that is distinct from all other hues. And for that, me, to exist, it needs to be special. It needs to be different. It needs a unique identity to cling to. When you start to see yourself as less of a separate drop and more like a wave on the same vast ocean, the need to be a special wave just dissolves. I remember meeting someone who embodied this without knowing it. He was an older man, a retired carpenter, and he had this quality of being completely unimpressed with himself. Not in a fake humble way. He just wasn't performing. He told me stories about his life, about building things with his hands, about his children and grandchildren. There was no attempt to make himself look good, no editing for effect. He was just present, telling me what happened. After an hour with him, I realized I knew nothing about what made him special, but I felt completely at home. He had forgotten to be a self, and in that forgetting, he was more present than anyone I'd met in years. This sign shows up in how you relate to success and failure. When something good happens, you don't need to tell everyone immediately. When something bad happens, you don't feel uniquely cursed. You start to notice that everyone gets hurt, everyone gets scared, everyone struggles with the same basic human experiences. You're not uniquely damaged. You're not uniquely blessed. You're a person among billions of other persons. There's a story about a famous violinist I once heard. After a breathtaking performance, the audience erupted in thunderous applause. They were on their feet, cheering, throwing flowers. The violinist took bow after bow. Later that night, a friend asked him, "How does it feel to have all those people adore you like that?" The violinist thought for a moment and said, "When I'm playing, I'm not thinking about them. I'm not thinking about me. There's just the music. The applause is nice, but it's like the echo of the music. It's not the music itself." When you're genuinely engaged in life, in the living of it, you forget to be special. You forget to be a self. There's just the experience. The sun on your skin. The conversation with a friend. The task at your desk. The need to be a special self, performing your specialness for an audience, just gets in the way. How do you know this is healthy ego dissolution, not low self-worth? There's a clear difference. With healthy dissolution, you recognize you're not more important than anyone else, but also not less. There's genuine equality. You can celebrate others' success without feeling diminished. With low self-worth, there's a negative charge, a feeling of being less than, worthless, inadequate. That's not liberation. That's just the ego wounded, still obsessed with itself but now in a negative way. Spiritual bypassing is another trap. You claim, "I'm not special," while secretly hoping people will disagree, will tell you how humble and evolved you are. That's inverted ego, still performing, still needing to be seen as special for not being special. True humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. Try this experiment. The next time something frustrating happens and the thought, "This always happens to me," arises, just pause. Replace it with, "This is a frustrating thing that happens to humans." Notice the shift. The first thought makes you the center of a unique tragedy. The second thought connects you to everyone else who has ever been frustrated. That's mana loosening its grip. I practice this with small things. Stuck in traffic. "This always happens to me," becomes, "Traffic happens." Computer crashes. "Of course this would happen to me," becomes, "Computers crash sometimes." It sounds simple, but the felt experience is completely different. The first is isolating, frustrating, personal. The second is just, life. This is the fourth sign. The conceit weakens. You're not becoming nobody. You're becoming everybody. The fifth sign that the fires are cooling is one of the most delightful, and also one of the most threatening to the way our world operates. It shows up as a simple, almost childlike appreciation for things that cost nothing. Our entire economic system is built on the premise that happiness is something you buy. You buy a vacation to be happy. You buy a new outfit to feel confident. You buy a fancy coffee to get a little lift. Advertisements constantly whisper, "You are incomplete, and this product will complete you." Social media shows us highlight reels of other people's purchases, creating a constant low-grade anxiety that we're missing out, that we need more to be enough. So when the fire of craving starts to cool, when you begin finding joy in things that are completely free, it can feel confusing at first. You might even think something's wrong with you. It's a Tuesday morning. You're sitting in your kitchen, and the light comes through the window in a particular way. It hits your coffee mug, and the steam from the coffee catches the light, and for a few seconds, it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. You just sit there, grinning like an idiot, completely captivated by steam and light. No reason. No cost. Just pure simple delight. Or you're driving to work, stressed about a meeting, and you pull into the parking lot and there's a spot right up front waiting for you. A perfect parking spot. And a wave of ridiculous childlike joy washes over you. You walk into the office with a spring in your step, all because of a parking spot. Or you're at home and your dog, or your cat, or just an animal you can see out the window, does something completely goofy. Trips over their own feet, chases their tail, looks at you with their head tilted. And you burst out laughing. A pure involuntary laugh, unconnected to any achievement or purchase. This is the mind starting to wake up to the simple profound beauty of the ordinary. It's what children have naturally. A kid can spend an hour playing with a cardboard box. To them, it's not a box. It's a spaceship, a castle, a time machine. They don't need the expensive toy inside. The potential is enough. I remember watching my neighbor's child one afternoon. He was maybe 4 years old, and he had a stick. Just a stick he'd found in the yard. For an hour, that stick was a sword, a magic wand, a fishing pole, a tool for drawing in the dirt. His face was absolutely alive with joy. And I thought about how many adults I know who spend thousands of dollars trying to get that same look on their faces, and rarely succeed. This is a sign that your mindfulness, your sati, is developing. You're actually present for your life. You're not racing through it trying to get to the next big moment. You're noticing the small ones. And you're realizing that the small moments are the only moments there are. There's a quote from the Dhammapada, a collection of the Buddha's sayings, that captures this perfectly. Happy indeed we live, we who possess nothing. We will feed on joy, like the radiant gods. This isn't about being an ascetic and giving away all your possessions. It's about no longer being possessed by your possessions. It's about no longer needing things to be happy, so that when things are there, you can enjoy them without clinging, and when they're not, you're not suffering. I had a friend once, a very successful businessman, who told me about a retreat he went on. He was used to 5-star hotels, fine dining, all the luxuries. He went to a simple meditation center where he slept on a mat on the floor and ate plain rice and vegetables. He expected to be miserable. On the third day, he was walking back to his simple hut after a meal. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. A cool breeze was blowing. And he said he felt a wave of happiness so profound, so deep, it brought tears to his eyes. He realized he hadn't felt that happy in years surrounded by all his luxury. The luxury had actually been a kind of noise, drowning out the simple signals of joy that were always there. Another friend, a woman who works with refugees, told me about a family she helped settle. They had lost everything, fled their country with nothing. They were given a small apartment with basic furniture. She visited them a few weeks later and found them sitting together, drinking tea, laughing. The children were playing with a ball made of tape and newspaper. She said she'd never seen a family look so content. They had nothing, and they had everything. This sign shows up in small ways every day. The sound of rain on the window. The feel of clean sheets. The taste of good bread. The way a stranger smiles at you and you carry that warmth for an hour. These things were always there, but you walked past them, looking for something bigger, something more. Now you're starting to notice. Here's a practice for this week. Pick one daily activity, just one, and do it like it's the most important thing in the world. Brush your teeth as if the act of brushing your teeth is a sacred ritual. Feel the bristles on your gums. Taste the toothpaste. Hear the sound of the brush. Give it your full attention, not as a means to an end, but as the thing itself. You might be surprised to discover that heaven isn't a place you go to after you die. It's a way of paying attention while you're alive. How do you know this is genuine contentment, not spiritual bypassing? Spiritual bypassing uses "I'm happy with simple things" as proof of progress, as an identity to wear. Genuine contentment has no need to prove anything. It's just there, quietly, like the light on your coffee cup. You're not performing simplicity. You're just noticing what's already present. This is the fifth sign. The small things start to matter more than the big things. And you realize the big things were never going to make you happy anyway. The sixth sign that the fires are cooling is perhaps the most transformative, because it changes your relationship to everything. It shows up as a strange new ability to watch your own thoughts as if they're a movie playing on a screen, rather than being completely lost inside them. For your whole life, you've probably identified with your thoughts. You've believed that you are your thoughts. When a sad thought comes, you feel sad. When an anxious thought comes, you feel anxious. When an angry thought comes, you feel angry. You are swept away by every mental current, like a small boat on a stormy sea. There's no separation between the thinker and the thought. They feel like the same thing. But then, something shifts. You're having a bad day. One of those days where everything seems to be going wrong. You're spiraling, catastrophizing about the future, replaying a conversation from 5 years ago, building an elaborate narrative about how your life is a disaster. And then, in the middle of this mental storm, something happens. It's not part of the storm. It's a thought about the storm. You literally hear yourself think, "Wow, I'm really spiraling right now." It's like you stepped outside of yourself for a split second. The person who was being swept away by the river is suddenly standing on the bank, watching the river flow past. There's a gap, a space, between the thinking and the awareness of the thinking. I experienced this most vividly during a conflict with someone I loved. We were in the middle of an argument, and I was completely activated. My heart was pounding. My jaw was tight. I was building a case in my mind, collecting evidence of how wrong they were, how right I was. And then, out of nowhere, a voice in my head said, "Look at you. You're so sure you're right. You're so certain." And I started laughing. Not because the situation was funny. Because I could see myself, really see myself, for the first time in that argument. The laughter broke the spell. The anger didn't disappear completely, but it lost its grip. I was no longer the anger. I was the one watching the anger. This is the beginning of what Buddhism calls vipassana, or insight meditation. It's the core practice the Buddha taught in the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the foundations of mindfulness. He taught to contemplate thoughts simply as thoughts. Not to get caught up in their stories. Not to push them away. Not to follow them down the rabbit hole. Just to watch them arise, watch them exist for a moment, and watch them pass away. Imagine you're sitting in a movie theater. The movie is playing, and it's intense. There's drama, suspense, emotion. You're completely absorbed. You forget you're in a theater. You forget there's a screen. The movie feels like reality. Then someone taps you on the shoulder and you remember. You remember you're just sitting in a chair. The drama is happening on a screen. It's just light and sound. You're still watching, but you're no longer lost. The movie continues, but you're free. This is what happens when you start watching your thoughts. You realize you cannot be your thoughts. The thinker and the thought are not the same thing. The observer is separate from the observed. This is the first direct taste of anatta, or not self. The thing you've been calling me, this solid permanent self, starts to feel a little less solid. It starts to feel more like a process, a series of events, than a thing. I had a friend who struggled with anxiety for years. She tried therapy, medication, every technique she could find. Nothing seemed to help permanently. Then she learned to watch her anxious thoughts instead of believing them. She told me it was like discovering she'd been living in a haunted house her whole life, convinced the ghosts were real. Then one day she woke up and realized they were just projections. The ghosts were still there, still moving around, still making noise. But she wasn't afraid of them anymore. They couldn't hurt her. This sign shows up in mundane moments too. You're stuck in traffic, getting furious at the drivers around you, creating a whole narrative about how inconsiderate people are. And then you hear yourself, like an echo, creating that narrative. And you start laughing because who is narrating the narration? If you're the thinker, who's listening to the thoughts? That gap, that laughter, that's the sign. How do you know this is healthy insight, not dissociation? There's an important distinction. Healthy insight makes you more present, more capable of responding to life skillfully. You observe your thoughts, but you can still function. You can still have a conversation, do your job, make decisions. The watching feels spacious, peaceful. Dissociation feels disconnected, floaty, unreal. You can't fully engage with life. The world feels dreamlike in an uncomfortable way. If you're unsure which is happening, treat it gently. Practice should make you more present, not less. There's a famous instruction the Buddha gave to a man named Bhaya. He said, in the scene, let there be just the scene. In the herd, just the herd. In the sensed, just the sensed. In the thought, just the thought. This is the practice. When you see, just see. Don't add a story about the seer. When you think, just think. Don't add a story about the thinker. Thoughts arise, and they pass away. You don't have to claim them. You don't have to fight them. You can just let them be. Practice this right now. Close your eyes for a moment. Become aware of your breath. Wait for the next thought to arise. It might be about this video. It might be about something you need to do later. It might be a random song lyric. When it arises, don't follow it. Don't engage. Just silently label it, thinking. Watch it like a cloud passing through the sky. Notice the moment it starts to fade, and the space that's left behind. That space, that awareness, that's what you are. You're the sky, not the weather. The weather changes, but the sky remains. This is the sixth sign. You start watching your thoughts instead of being your thoughts. And in that watching, freedom begins. The seventh sign that the fires are cooling is the most paradoxical of all. It shows up right now, as you're listening. A quiet thought whispers, "This doesn't apply to me." You've heard these signs. Maybe you recognized yourself in some. And then, almost immediately, another thought arises. "Yeah, but I still got angry this morning. Yeah, but I still scroll mindlessly. This is interesting, but it's probably not for me." That thought, that doubt, that self-disqualification, that's the sign. It's the ego's last magic trick. It tries to survive by inverting itself. If it can't be the special enlightened one, it will be the special unenlightened one. The one so humble, so aware of failings, that they couldn't possibly be making progress. It's still about me. I'm not enlightened enough. I'm not a real practitioner. Still a story about a self. I remember sitting with a meditation teacher after a retreat. I came full of insights, wanting confirmation I was making progress. He listened, nodded, then said, "That's nice. Now tell me about the moments when you forgot all of that and just lived your life." I wanted validation. He was pointing me away from the story of progress and back to actual life. The Buddha called this spiritual materialism, using teachings to build a better self-image. We collect insights like trophies. We compare our practice to others. We want to be seen as evolved. Even the thought, "I am enlightened," creates the separate, "I." Enlightenment is meant to dissolve. A famous Zen saying, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." Nothing dramatic changes outside. You still do ordinary things. The difference is internal, in your relationship to the wood chopping. And that difference isn't something to parade. A monk spent 20 years in a remote cave. Finally he felt a breakthrough. He came down radiating peace. Walking through a village marketplace, someone bumped into him hard and kept walking. Instantly, hot anger surged. His face tightened. Then he started laughing. He realized the fires don't extinguish by pretending they're gone. They cool when you stop identifying with them. The anger arose, but he didn't grab it. He saw it, smiled, let it go. The fire was there but lost its power to burn. This is the sign. You're not sure this applies. You doubt your experience. You disqualify yourself. In that doubt, if you look closely, you might see the ego protecting itself one last time. How do you know this is genuine humility, not false modesty? Genuine humility means you don't think about whether you're spiritual. The question barely arises. No charge. False modesty claims, "I'm not spiritual," while secretly hoping people will disagree. Still ego performing. Unhealthy self-doubt invalidates all positive changes because you don't feel worthy. That's a wound, not humility. Can you acknowledge growth without making it identity? Can you acknowledge remaining work without self-flagellation? That's the balance. A young monk told his teacher, I've practiced for years and feel no progress." The teacher said, "That's good." The monk was confused. "How is that good?" The teacher said, "When you first came, you thought you'd arrived. Now you know you're walking. That's not failure. That's the path. True progress is thinking about yourself less. Not being a better self. Just forgetting to be a self. You get absorbed in conversation. You're moved by music. For those moments, the I having the experience isn't there. Just the experience. I experienced this recently with an old friend. We met for coffee and talked for 3 hours. Somewhere in the middle, I forgot I was there. There was just the conversation, the connection, the laughter. Later, driving home, I realized I hadn't thought about myself once during that entire time. No self-monitoring. No wondering how I was coming across. Just pure presence. That's the taste of man awakening. If you're thinking, "Nah, not me," just notice that thought. Don't believe it. Don't fight it. Watch it. See if you can notice the subtle I that thought protects. The conceit is still there, but you've caught it in the act. That catching, that awareness, is itself a sign the fire is cooling. There's no finish line. No graduation. The path isn't about becoming someone with all the signs checked. It's about noticing when the grip loosens, even slightly. Watching the fire instead of being burned. I think about a woman I met at a meditation center. She'd been practicing for decades and had every reason to consider herself advanced. But when people praised her, she genuinely looked confused. She wasn't being modest. She just didn't see herself that way. She was too busy living to collect an identity as a spiritual person. That's the real thing. Not performing humility. Just forgetting to perform at all. The people who talk most about spiritual progress are often most attached to the identity of being spiritual. The people actually transforming are usually too busy living to notice. So if you're sitting there thinking, "I don't know if this applies," good. Stay with that not knowing. Don't make it a new identity. Don't make "I'm not special" a new way to be special. Just notice the thought, smile, let it go. This is the 7th sign. You doubt it applies. And that doubt, seen clearly without judgment, without story, that doubt itself is confirmation. The fires are cooling. Not out. Not gone. Cooling. And that cooling, that gradual lessening of heat, isn't a problem to solve. It's not a sign you're broken. It's the path itself, unfolding exactly as it should. The 8th sign that the fires are cooling is one you might not expect. It shows up as a strange new relationship with time, specifically with the future and the past. You start noticing that you're spending less time there. For most of us, life is lived somewhere else. We're constantly projecting into the future, planning, worrying, anticipating, hoping. Or we're replaying the past, regretting, ruminating, wishing things had gone differently. The present moment, the only place where life actually happens, gets squeezed into a tiny gap between past and future that we barely occupy. When the fires start cooling, that begins to shift. You're waiting in line at the grocery store. The old you would have been anywhere but here. Reaching for your phone, planning dinner, worrying about tomorrow's meeting, replaying yesterday's conversation. But now, something's different. You're just standing in line. You notice the colors of the vegetables. You feel the cool air from the refrigerated section. You hear the beep of the scanner, the chatter of the cashier, the rustle of bags. And it's not boring. It's actually interesting. The ordinary world, fully experienced, is surprisingly rich. I noticed this recently while waiting for a train. The old me would have been impatient, checking the time, frustrated by the delay. Instead, I found myself watching the light on the tracks, the way it shifted as clouds moved across the sun. I watched people walking by, not judging them, just noticing them as fellow humans on their own journeys. The train came when it came. I wasn't annoyed. I'd already had a full experience just waiting. This is what Buddhism calls mindfulness maturing. Not as a practice you do, but as a quality that starts to permeate ordinary life. You're not trying to be present. You just are. Presence becomes the default rather than the exception. There's a story about a master who was asked what he did before enlightenment and what he did after. He said, "Before enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water. After enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water." The questioner was confused. "Then what's the difference?" The master smiled. "Before enlightenment, I was miserable chopping wood and carrying water. After enlightenment, I just chop wood and carry water." The difference isn't in the activity. It's in the relationship to the activity. Before, you're always trying to get somewhere else, be somewhere else, have the moment end so the next moment can begin. After, you're just here, wherever here is, fully alive to whatever is happening. I think about my grandmother in her final years. She had a small garden, and she would spend hours there, just tending her plants. I asked her once if she got bored, doing the same thing day after day. She looked at me like I'd asked a strange question. Bored? How could I be bored? The plants change every day. The light changes every day. I change every day. It's never the same twice. She wasn't a Buddhist. She'd never meditated. But she'd discovered something that many meditators spend decades trying to find. She'd learned to be where she was. This sign shows up in small ways. You're eating a meal and you actually taste it, rather than eating while scrolling or planning or worrying. You're walking somewhere and you feel your feet on the ground, the air on your skin. You're talking to someone and you're actually listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak. A friend told me about a walk he took with his young daughter. She kept stopping to look at things. A leaf. A crack in the sidewalk. A bug. He felt impatient at first, wanting to get to the destination. Then he realized there was no destination. The walk was the point. He stopped trying to get somewhere and started being where he was. He said it was the best walk of his life. How do you know this is genuine presence, not just association or zoning out? Presence has a quality of aliveness to it. You're fully here, fully aware, fully engaged. Dissociation feels numb, disconnected, floaty. Presence feels like waking up. Colors seem brighter. Sounds seem clearer. You're not trying to escape anything. You're just here, and here is enough. There's a practice you can try. Pick one daily activity this week and do it like it's the only thing that matters. Brushing your teeth. Washing dishes. Walking to your car. Give it your full attention. Not as a means to an end, but as the thing itself. Feel the bristles. Hear the water. Notice the movement of your body. You might discover that heaven isn't a place you go after you die. It's a way of paying attention while you're alive. This is the 8th sign. You start showing up for your actual life. Not the life you wish you had. Not the life you're trying to get to. This one. Right here. Right now. And you find it's enough. So here we are at the end of this exploration. You've sat with these 8 signs. Maybe you recognized yourself in some. Maybe none felt familiar. Wherever you are is exactly where you need to be. The Buddha compared the path to an ocean that deepens gradually. You don't walk off the beach and suddenly find yourself in water a mile deep. First it covers your feet, then your ankles, your knees. You feel the temperature change long before you're in over your head. These signs are evidence that you've stepped into the water. The fires of craving, aversion, and delusion are cooling. Not out. Not gone. Cooling. The anger doesn't last as long. The wanting doesn't control you as much. That's not failure. That's the path. Remember that grocery store moment. Someone cuts in front. The old irritation rises. But now there's a gap. A tiny pause before the story starts. In that gap, you're not a victim. You're just a human watching another human. And in that gap, there's peace. That peace isn't a problem to fix. It's an invitation to wake up to a reality that's been here all along, hidden behind the smoke of your own burning. The tightness in your chest when things go wrong. The boredom with things that used to excite you. The strange peace when you stop fighting reality. These aren't problems. They're the path itself. Which sign resonated most? Just notice it. Hold it gently. Let it be a signpost back to the present moment, where the path is always waiting. If this helped you see your own experience differently, please like and subscribe to Monk's Temple. We'll be here, exploring together. Until next time, just watch the fire. Not the story. The fire. You might find it's not as hot as you thought. And in that realization, there is peace.